Hey, it's Mark Zimmerman. Hope you're doing well today. I've been asked many times, how can I get involved as a real estate investor? What different ways can I make money in real estate? And gosh, that answer, there's a million and one of them, right? Um, some more applicable to a new investor, some if you've been doing it for a while. But there's a whole bunch of different ways to make money in residential real estate. And what I thought I'd do is I put together a list of kind of the top ones that come into my head. And every one of these I've done in one form or another. And I'm going to go over them pretty quickly. I think I've got 17, 18 of them. However, we're not going to go into each one in great detail. We can do that in another call, or you can do your own research. And trust me, there's lots of data on the internet that can kind of guide you through what each one of these different ways of making money in real estate are, and kind of point you in the right direction. So let's go ahead and get started on this. Probably the first and foremost kind of easy thing to do that doesn't require great credit, it doesn't require a lot of money, and that is basically doing what's called an assignment of contract. And here's what you do. You do the legwork, you find the great deal. You do have to find something that's going to be at a pretty good discount, so there's a spread, there's money for someone else to make. But you go ahead and find the deal, and you get it under contract. And once you get under contract, you make sure that you put whatever entity that you're buying the property under, whether that's your name or an LLC or whatever that you've created, and you put after that and or assigns on the buyer's line on the contract. And that and or assign statement allows you to assign the contract. And all that means is that once you get this house under contract at say 65, 70% on the dollar, then you just go out and you find someone else that wants to buy it to you at a higher spread, buy it from you at a higher spread, and you assign the contract to them for a flat fee. And then they're the ones that gotta have to come up with the money, whether it's cash or financing, and they're the ones that close, and they're the ones that finish the deal. And it's a nice way to get into real estate pretty quickly and make some money in real estate. And so the way that happens is, let's say you buy a house for 65 cents, 70 cents on the dollar, you get under contract, needs repairs, and you find somebody to buy it at 75 cents on the dollar, or 80%, whatever you can get. Whatever that spread is, whatever that works out to be, would be your assignment fee. So if a house is worth 100,000 and you pick it up for 60 and you sell it to somebody or assign the contract to somebody for 65, well, then that assignment fee is going to be $5,000. And there's a form that you fill out that's basically an assignment of contract form that's filed with the title company wherever it's closed. And it shows up on the closing statement as a fee that goes to you for that assignment fee. And the sellers usually don't care, because guess what? They're getting the agreed upon amount anyway. And the person you're selling it to is happy because they're getting a deal that they like, or they wouldn't have made the deal, and you're happy because you're making that spread. You don't have to come up with the money or worry about financing or credit or all that other stuff or closing. So that's an assignment of contract. That's probably the lowest form of real estate investment in terms of ease, and not having to go through all the hurdles of getting financing or coming up with the cash. The next thing is wholesaling properties as is. Now, the difference between wholesaling a property and assigning it is really that you're going to close on it. So you would have to come up with the cash to buy it, whether you finance that or you have cash. You would go to the title company, you'd close on it. And after you closed on the property, and you now are actually the owner, that you bought it, a discount, let's say, then you find somebody else to buy it from you as is. Now, of course, they're not going to buy it from you at full retail because it probably needs work, and they also need to make some money too. So this is a great thing when you close on a property and you don't want to put a lot of money into it, and there's enough meat on the bone, as they say, enough spread to be able to sell the property to someone else, and they can make money too. And you just basically sell it to them and sell it as is, and you close again. You've got to sometimes pay another closing fee, unless you can find a title company that's willing to do a double close, and sometimes they'll work with you on that. That's basically a double close, where you purchase a property and then turn around and sell it 30 minutes later in another room. In those cases, you don't even have to, a lot of times, bring financing because you're double closing. But anyway, so you can double close on a wholesale, or you can wait and find that buyer from you to get a little bit more money in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, but you don't do anything to the property, and that's called wholesaling and as is property, right? You're not fixing it up. Now, something very similar to that, and I've heard it called hoteling, back in the old days when I had my We Buy Ugly Houses franchise. I think we might have coined that term back 25 years ago, but it's called wholetailing. So what you're doing is it's not a wholesale deal where it's strictly as is, and it's not a retail deal where you've fixed it up and made it super nice. It's a wholetail, meaning partial wholesale, partial retail. And in that scenario, what you do is you go ahead and spend the money on those big ticket items that scare a lot of buyers away. Maybe the roof is leaking and it needs a new roof. That's a pretty big ticket item. Maybe the foundation's all cracked up and it's unlevel, and so you go ahead and fix the foundation. That could be a big ticket item. And so in the wholetailing world, kind of like wholesaling, in both cases you'd clean out the property real well, vacuum mop, clean, make it look really nice. If it's a hotel situation like we're talking about now, you'd go ahead and do those big repairs. And then of course, don't do anything else after that, and you wholetail it, and you usually can get more money when it has those big major ticket items than if you just sold it as is, because you've gone ahead and taken care of those two big things. And you can usually sell it for more than what it costs for you to do those big things. And even not if you break even or just make a little bit more, you're going to be able to sell it quicker because people aren't so concerned about the foundation or the roof. So that's wholetailing. That's another option for you. Another option that we talk about a little bit is co-wholesaling. And that's basically where you partner up with other wholesalers and basically network together in order to find deals and maybe even split the profit you make from wholesaling that property or even assigning that property. So it's wholesaling, but you're just doing it in a group, which kind of leverages the power of a bunch of people in the group all making this happen together and then splitting whatever comes out of that on everybody's efforts. And that's co-wholesaling. And then flowing into the next thing is basically the fix and flip, right? Wow, I'm flipping properties. And when I say flip properties, usually where I'm coming from when I say that I flipped a property is that I'm going to buy it, I'm going to fix it up, and I'm going to sell it, right? Typically, you're going to buy that property at a discount, and then you're going to renovate it yourself, and then you're going to sell it retail to a retail buyer, hopefully, for what the market would be for a fixed up nice property, right? So that's definitely kind of the traditional way that you see all the flipping shows on TV do. The downside of that is you are going to have to close on it. You're going to have to come up with financing or cash to buy the property. You have to come up with the financing or cash to do the rehab. There's going to be several months until it's ready to be put on the market for sale as you get that renovation done, and you've got to deal with the contractors. And then you got to find a buyer from you, maybe pay a realtor to make that happen at the end of the day. So there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle when you're going to be doing a fix and flip or flipping a house, but that's definitely something you can do. Another thing that you can do is buy and hold, right? That's where you buy a house and you fix it up and then you turn it into a rental rather than selling it retail. And that's certainly a great way to get passive income. It's not very passive, but it is passive on a technical sense, and have that long-term appreciation gain that you get that is really the reason why people buy rental property. And I've talked about why you want to purchase rental property in many other videos, and you can reference those. So you can do that traditionally, right, where you buy it, probably in cash, you repair it, and then you rent it, and that's a nice little spread there. Then you've probably heard of the BRRRR method, right? The BRRRR strategy that a lot of people talk about, which is basically buying it, rehabbing it, renting it, and then after you get it rented, then you refinance out of the short-term note that you had it on when you purchased the property, or even in cash, and you refinance that with a bank loan based on the new value of the property now it's fixed up and that there's a tenant in the property. And then you repeat the process. So those are the 4 R's, right? Which is rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. So buy it, rehab, rent it, refinance, and repeat. So that's a BRRRR method. Certainly a good method as well to acquire a lot of rental properties because you're leveraging, basically financing to make that happen to where you can get multiple properties under your portfolio that are rentals pretty quickly. All right, how about that? Now, there's another strategy that you can take, and that's basically doing what we call subject to or sub-to contracts. This is maybe in a case where it doesn't fit the numbers to buy it with a short-term hard money loan, which does have some maximum percents of after repaired value, formulas that you have to follow in order to qualify to that financing without having to bring a ton of money to the table. So with a subject to a contract, basically you're just taking over the existing mortgage payments that the seller has in place right now, and it allows them to move on and not worry about that mortgage payment anymore. A lot of times you can do it with very little money down. The times that I've done it, I've just given the seller a couple $3,000 for me doing this. Usually it's because they're getting ready to get foreclosed on, they're behind on some payments, or they're really struggling. They've got two houses and they weren't able to sell the one that they came from, and so it really allows the seller to get out of that property and not have to make those payments. Now the downside is that it does stay on their credit, right, until you refinance it off or do something with it. So that is a downside, but it is a definite way to purchase real estate. And in those scenarios, you don't even have to worry about getting a new loan or coming up with cash, because you're basically just taking over the mortgage payments and maybe getting the mortgage current for the person that's selling. So that's subject to contracts. Another way that you can go down the investor road is doing seller financing. And what's nice about that is when you purchase the property from the seller, you go ahead and agree to, or they go ahead and agree to let you be the lendee, right? They're basically going to finance you to buy their property. And what that means is, I've done this a couple times where there were some properties where the owner of the property owned it free and clear, and it didn't quite fit the numbers that I needed to be able to buy it. So we figured out an owner financing deal where they were the owner financer, the seller financer, and they charged me like 10% interest, and it was a 30-year note. And I went ahead and closed on it and sent the mortgage payment to them, right, because they owned it free and clear. And then after about 3 years, after having a tenant in there and granting some equity and also some appreciation, I went ahead and refinanced that property out back down to where I used to be at about 4.5–5%. So having a seller go ahead and finance that property for you to buy is a great way to, again, purchase property, invest property without having to come up with financing or qualify for a loan. So now you can also do that the other way. After you purchase a property and you fix it up and you put, say, a tenant in or a resident, what you can do is, if you have a long-term note, go ahead and refinance it out onto a 30-year note. You can go ahead and be the seller financer in that scenario for your buyer. And I've done a bunch of those, probably at least 15, 20 of those over the years. A ton to me, maybe not to some of you owner finance gurus, but I loved it. Seller financing, it's great. Every single one of the ones that I did, I actually sold it to the resident that was in the property, my tenant. And on those, I got 11.99% interest. I got anywhere from 10 to 15% down in cash. And then basically they own the property. I've still got the mortgage in my name, which was fine. It was under my company name. And I made the spread. Basically what my interest rate was, 5.5–6% versus what I was charging them, 11.99. Plus I also got the down payment, which was nice. Plus I sold it at full market value, which is nice. And then the best part is, now they weren't no longer tenants, but they were actually the owner of the property. Anytime something broke, they didn't call me. Leaky sink, hot water heater stopped working. They own the property. You don't call Bank of America or whoever has your mortgage when something goes wrong with your house that you own. Same scenario here. So basically doing seller wrap mortgages. There's some details on that you need to read up on. But again, this is just kind of running through pretty quickly some of the different ways that I know of that you can make money in real estate that I wanted to share with everybody. So how about seller leasebacks? That's another thing that I've done before that works out really well. You buy the property, but you allow the seller to lease it back from you for a specific amount of time. And it's really nice because it allows a seller to stay in the property. You get immediate rental income because now you're not trying to find a tenant to move in. You basically, the seller that's in is the person that's going to start being the tenant and paying you rent. And it's a really nice way to get a seller out of financial distress where they're losing the property or something, but yet you don't make them move right away. You put in a 6-month lease, 12-month lease, whatever, and just turn them into a tenant, and now you're the owner of the property, and it's a really nice way to go. So that's basically a seller leaseback. Something that I used to do a lot, and they changed the rules in Texas, and I don't do it as much anymore, but you can still do it. A lot of people do, and that is you can do basically a lease-to-own purchase contract, right? Or yeah, lease-to-own purchase contract. So I did this a lot back in the day, and I think it's a still really neat thing to do. When you have a house that you've bought and you fixed up, and you're going to rent it, what you can do is you can rent it, but then put a lease to purchase kind of contract in place too. And what happens is that the tenant that you're leasing the property to pays you a certain fee, a down payment of whatever it is that you can get or what you agree to for that purchase contract. And then the contract says that in the next 12 months or the next 24 months or the next 36 months, the tenant agrees to go ahead and get a loan and purchase the house from you as the buyer at the set amount that you agreed upon, less whatever that money was that they put down. And if they don't do that, usually those purchase contracts state that then that money that they put down, they lose that and you keep that. I won't go into the details, but that's why they changed some of the rules in Texas, because shady investors were taking advantage of that little clause that said if they didn't refinance in say 12 months or get a loan in 12 months and buy it from the owner of the property that was providing that lease to purchase option, they were keeping those down payments, knowing because they knew that they were never going to be able to finance that property with their credit or whatever. So it's a great thing. I liked it because it gave pseudo ownership to my residents. They felt like they owned the property, even though they hadn't executed that purchase contract yet in terms of getting financing or whatever to buy it from me. But they sure did treat the house nicer than if they were just a resident, because in their minds, it was their house. They may not officially own it yet, but once they did purchase it in 12 months or 18 months, it was going to be theirs. And it was just a really good deal. And I liked them. I liked doing the lease to purchase or rent to own contracts. So that's really good. So what else? This isn't really a way to buy property, but just know that once you do buy and fix up and get ready to rent a property to a resident, don't forget that there are those government-backed rental programs like what we call Section 8 in Texas, the housing programs. I've owned 50 plus Section 8 rental properties in my day, and there are some pros and cons to it. Probably the biggest pro or positive on those Section 8 rentals is if you do put a Section 8 or a government-backed, housing resident into that property, the government's going to pay the majority of the rent. They're going to pay it at the beginning of the month. Mine always came in on the 6th, like clockwork, direct deposit in my account. You didn't have to go chase money other than maybe the small portion that the resident had to kick out. But anyway, I won't go into a long-winded dissertation about the pros and the cons about Section 8, but just know it's a good route to go when you're going to be a landlord if you're comfortable with that kind of government-backed resident. So just another kind of side note for when you're renting property out. Don't forget about Section 8 residents. Next, there are short-term rentals, right? You can buy, fix up, and then hold property, but rather than doing a long-term rental, meaning 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, you can actually do short-term rentals. You can do vacation rentals. This is your Airbnb. This is your VRBO. I actually currently own a couple of Airbnbs, and it's something that I think can be profitable, but there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of turns that you have to figure out as these residents come and go into your Airbnb, right? You've got to figure out cleaning. You got to figure out a way to keep the quality control up on the cleaning and on how the property presents. There are some interesting challenges regarding the guests. They're called guests, not residents. They're coming to stay for a day or two or a week. But just know that short-term rentals are another great way to invest in real estate, and we can talk about that in great detail later as well. Another thing that you can do, which I love, especially if you're a younger person, I don't even think you have to be younger. Let's just say if it fits your lifestyle, is what's called house hacking. And all that is that you buy a single-family multi-unit property like a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex. Those are all still considered single-family properties. So let's say you buy a duplex. Let's make it really easy. You go ahead and move into one side of the duplex. and you go ahead and rent out the other side. And a lot of times the rent that you're collecting from the other side of that duplex is going to cover your mortgage and your property taxes and your property insurance you got to pay every month. And you're right there on site, so that way you can be a pretty on hands and an aware landlord about what's going on in your own property because it's right next door. You can do this with a triplex or a quadplex and have 2 or 3 units paying your mortgage for and be living in there as well, and basically living for free in the one that you choose to stay in and not rent out. So house hacking is a really interesting way to do it. I had a friend that did that in college. He bought a triplex, lived in 1 unit, rented out the other 2, and not only did it pay for his mortgage for the triplex, the other 2 units, but also gave him a little extra money every month for fun and stuff in school. So something to think about. Then of course there's real estate syndication, right? This is where you can actually partner with other investors and pool your money together. And when you do that, you're going to have basically passive investors that provide the capital, the money, and then you're going to have active investors that manage the deal and make it happen, and then basically split the profits. That's real estate syndication, and it's another good way to generate financing if you can't do it on your own for whatever reason. There's real estate crowdfunding. This is something I've never done. Out of everything, this is the one thing I haven't done. But it's as just like it said, you basically get lots of investors to invest small amounts of money to fund your deal, and then you pay out, by the profits to all the people that invested based on the percent that they put in and the amount that they put in. The investors that do the crowdfunding obviously aren't going to have ownership in the property, but they are going to have ownership in the crowdfund, and they'll get that little piece that they get depending on how much they spent or they paid to get into the crowdfunding deal. Something to think about, something I'm not that aware of, but I wanted to bring it up to you anyway because I know some people have used crowdfunding in the past, especially on some bigger multifamily projects. And then of course there's the tax lien process that you can go through, where you can basically buy the tax deeds or the tax liens from the counties, right, where the property is, because somebody owes property taxes and they're going to be auctioned off. Just know that if you do this, that each state has a different redemption period, and a redemption period basically says that the owner of the property whose tax lien you purchased and whose property you purchased, right, for the tax lien amount, has a certain amount of time to pay back the taxes, and then you have to give the property back to them. Now, in most states, you can collect a percent of that amount towards attorney fees, which is nice. If you did some renovations, you may or may not get reimbursed for that, sometimes not, so it's a little risky. But I know a lot of people have done really well with tax lien purchases, and just know that's a possibility that you can go down to, and an interesting one at that. And then of course there's real estate investment trusts. These basically are publicly traded, what they call REITs. You can get involved as an investor in those sometimes. I even have a couple of friends that have created their own REITs, which is pretty cool. But that's just kind of another scenario where people are putting their money in to the REIT and then getting a return on that investment, right? And those returns are done through dividends and through stock appreciation through the REIT. So, woo! We just spent about 24 minutes going through all the different ways that I kind of know of you can make money in real estate. I hope this was helpful. Go ahead and do your own individual research on each one of these. You can always put in the comments below if you have anything you want to share about that, anything you'd like to add, any questions that you might have. But just know that there's so many different ways as a new investor or a seasoned investor to purchase real estate, or even just to get involved in the real estate game without even having to close or come up with the financing, that you can make this happen. So I wish you well in your investment journey, as I always say. We can only really rise if we lift each other up. I like that one too, Ingersoll's quote. And so anyway, go out and make it happen. I think it's a great way to bring in money, bring in some income. And again, I wish you well. I'm Mark Zimmerman, and I'm out.
Thanks for watching, everyone. We really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe below.